Thousands of people have received additional bills, some of them for tens of thousands of pounds from the taxman in the past few weeks. Bills they've often got no means of paying.
Following a change in the law known as the loan charge, the campaigners say amounts to a form of retrospective taxation.
But the government says that the use of schemes that involve paying contractors their income in the form of loans had only one purpose: to avoid paying tax.
Under these schemes, people weren't paid, as you would expect, a normal salary. They would be paid a small salary, and on top of that, they would also be paid the rest of their remuneration in loans. And the thing about that is that these loans didn't pay income tax or national insurance.
And now they're sending demands, in some cases for tens of thousands of pounds, to contractors who made use of the schemes. The result, an increasingly bitter argument between the tax authorities and those who were accused of illegitimate tax avoidance.
So how did it come to this? And why would freelancers agree to be paid via a loan scheme in the first place?
This doesn't just affect high earners, it affects a range of people, from IT contractors to oil and gas workers, locum doctors, social workers, nurses. A lot of people entered into them on the advice of trusted professionals like accountants, tax advisors, recruitment agencies who said that they couldn't work for a particular company unless they chose to be paid via a scheme like this.
But political opposition to the government's approach is growing.
I'm here to meet Ross Thomson. He's one of the MPs who's calling on the government to change course.
The real issue that we have, and I particularly have with the loan charge, is that we're going back, in some cases, 20 years, and demanding, therefore, huge bills from people, which in many cases they just can't afford.
But after a last-ditch bid to secure a delay failed, the government isn't backing down.
I appreciate that facing any tax bill is unwelcome, but it is only right that we deal with disguised remuneration. And where we fail to do so, Madam Deputy Speaker, then we are effectively saying to the 99.8% of other taxpayers who have not been involved in these schemes that we expect them to pay more. And we deny our vital public services, our nurses, our teachers, our doctors, our police and many others the funding that they deserve.
The government insists that the loan charge is not a retrospective measure, but a charge on loans still outstanding in April 2019.
They said that they don't want to make anybody bankrupt and that insolvency is only considered as a last resort.
Let me first welcome the BBC's political editor, Laura Kunsberg, but I'm going to start with Mel Stride as a Treasury Minister. Can you continue to defend this change in the law when people's lives are being ruined by it?
Well, I think the first thing to say is clearly it's a great pity to me that people are distressed about this issue, and
Not just distressed, but their lives are being ruined.
I totally get that, but I think it's very clear that we make it very clear what's going on here, so that your viewers understand this. I, as an employer, could employ you as an employee and pay you in the normal way, so that you pay PAYE, your income tax, national insurance. I pay employers' national insurance, so about 50% of that is going in tax. Or I say to you, under a loan scheme, I'll tell you what, I'll send your salary out to an offshore trust in a low or no tax jurisdiction, and then we'll loan the money back from the trust. It'll come back into the UK, and you may receive, as your clip said, a very small salary, enough to mop up the personal allowance, meaning you don't pay any tax, and enough to make sure you qualify for your state pension. But hold on, here's the trick. So the loan that you receive from the offshore trust overseas, and you're never going to have to pay it back, and that's a critical point. So it's not a loan that you and I would understand as a loan. Actually, they argue, means you pay no tax.
Why aren't you going after the employers
most people
who actually
would feel that that is
But why
right.
aren't you going after the employers who offered these schemes, or the advisors who said that this was legitimate? Because the change, I understand the scheme as you've explained it, and I hope the viewers do too, but the charge that is now going to be brought to bear affects contractors, freelancers, locum nurses and doctors, supply teachers, not just high earners. And you're not going after the employers.
Okay. In terms of those whom it's affecting, it's generally affecting those who, on average, are earning over twice the average salary for somebody in the United Kingdom.
And what about those who
aren't? The second thing is, in terms of who the revenue will go to first, it will be the employer. Of the 6,000 settlements that have occurred so far, which has raised over £1 billion for our doctors and nurses, etc., 85% of that has come from employers not employees.
All right, well then, will people have
to
to sell their homes to pay?
HMRC has gone very publicly, and I have stated at the dispatch box in the House of Commons, that no, they will not be required to sell their primary residence as a consequence of settling their loan charge arrangements. They can, if people talk to HMRC, they can have a time to pay arrangements, which can be 10 years or more. It is very, very rare that anybody is bankrupted. It is not the intention of HMRC to bankrupt anybody as a consequence of this situation.
All right,
but the reality is that most people would have known, and the 99.8% that never got anywhere near these schemes knew that if it looked too good to be true, it probably was.
The thing is, Laura, schemes, tax avoidance schemes and closing loopholes are extremely popular, and there'll be probably most of Parliament supporting the idea of making sure people pay tax. In practice, though, it can be very, very different.
It can be very, very different because the people who have enormous resources and enormous access to advisors and lawyers are always rather well equipped to try to move things around and mitigate whatever laws are changed. Now, successive governments and this government have tried very hard to try to close things down wherever they've sort of popped up. But there's one other issue in this story, which has been a sort of fundamental principle when governments have tried to clamp down on tax avoidance, is that whatever changes they make don't apply retrospectively. This, however, is affecting people. Clearly, they think they're being punished for things that happened in the past. And I wonder why, in this case, the Minister believes that's fair.
Well, it's not retrospective, and the reason for that is there was no point in our history where the tax code permitted what I've just described earlier to happen and avoid tax. It's never been compliant with our tax code. That's the first point. The second point is that the loan that I described in this particular scheme, of course, still persists in the present. So it is still there today.
Right.
And what we said when we brought the legislation in 2016, before I arrived in my post, actually, was that people would have 3 years they could pay off the loan, they could refinance the loan, they could demonstrate that it's a real loan. And if they could do that, then no problem at all.
But the effect is retrospective.
The effect is retrospective.
Well,
and the Conservative MP Ross Thomson is saying he's hearing cases where this is affecting people even going back 20 years. But it is true, as you say, it's one of the interesting things. It's very easy for governments to say, as they always do, we will do our very best to clamp down on tax avoidance, which we should also say is very different from tax evasion, which is something that's criminal and a different and illegal and different kind of thing. But in practice, what does happen often, I'm afraid, is people who didn't have a sense that they were really doing anything wrong are the people who end up.
Can I make one final point, Joe, on this? Because the amounts involved here, that there were some in your clip. There are some people in the Commons have been raised £900,000. Well, that probably means you put £2 million through a scheme.
Right.
The average amount that's in the frame here is £13,000.
All right.
And of course, you could have up to 10+ years to repay that.
Well, do you side with HMRC and Mel Stride in this?
No, because, Joe, you put a question to Mel earlier on, and this has been put, Mel, to you on a number of occasions. Why don't you go against the advisors?
You don't.
If the advice was to create an illegal scheme, then giving that advice actually was illegal in its own terms. Yes. Now, if that's right, then that would be actionable, but it would be enormously helpful if you would come out and say very, very clearly the advisors were behaving inappropriately.
Tony, we have done exactly that, and at the dispatch box I've made these points very clearly. We are investigating 100 promoters at the moment, many of whom are involved in these disguised remuneration schemes. We are taking people through the courts. Hyrax Resources was one particular case where we have protected £40 million worth of tax avoidance by shutting that operation down through taking them through the courts. We are taking people through the courts under DOTAS, which goes back to 2004, where we are winning these cases. We have gone to the Supreme Court to shut down cases involving, in that case, the Rangers football club. So
I thought Labour was in favour of cracking down on tax avoidance.
We are, but look...
But not in reality.
No, of course, in reality. I have a constituent who's affected by this. She herself has said, look, she's not happy, obviously, but she will pay the tax that's been missing. The problem she's had, though, and I've had this as well, by the way, dealing with the HMRC is dealing with a very difficult, very obdurate and actually very unsympathetic agency.
Well, Kirsty, you're the economy spokesman for the SNP. Yeah. Are you going to be cracking down on tax avoidance, supporting the government?
When this came through in the finance bill, we did not vote against it. We have said that everybody should pay all of the tax that they are due.
Oh, right.
But What we have said is the way that HMRC have gone about this has been cack-handed in a lot of ways. So I have advocated on behalf of constituents who have come and said that they asked HMRC for a calculation figure. The calculation figure wasn't forthcoming for a very long time, and when it did come, it was wrong. And I have advocated on behalf of those constituents. The other thing that HMRC have done is they've come out, as the Minister said, to say that nobody should lose their main home, and also nobody should be made bankrupt. But they've been unwilling to agree the length of payment plans that are required in order for that to take place. So I've argued that payment plans, people should pay the tax, absolutely, but they should pay it in a reasonable payment plan that ensures that they do not lose their home and that they are not made bankrupt as a result.
And can I just say the All-Party Parliamentary Loan Charge Group, brought together by cross-party politicians, says that there is a clear risk to the mental welfare of people facing the loan charge.
OK, so HMRC, I'm glad that Kirsty has taken the position that she has on the principle of this, because it is not right, and we need to sort it out. And I think most people listening to this programme would agree with that. But she's absolutely right also that we have to do it in a sympathetic and appropriate and measured way. So we have a helpline with trained staff there specifically for those involved in the loan charge, where they can speak to them. We have a whole unit that looks after...
That's not people's experience, Mel. Well, it's not people's experience.
You say that, Tony, and you base it on one or two examples that you've come across, but all I can tell you is from the centre there is a major push that is to make sure this is dealt with sympathetically, because we do get these points.
All right, well, thank you.
And giving people time to take.
Thank you for all your points, because this is obviously an important discussion for people to have when it comes to the idea of paying tax and tax avoidance.